Campaign '08 is now in full swing with the Iowa caucuses last week and now the New Hampshire primary on Tuesday. We've also a few congressional races in our state worth watching this year, and one of the tighter races could be in the 5th District, where it is always a tight race. With us today is Congressman Chris Murphy, a freshman term seeking re-election.
Thanks for having me.
How'd the first year go?
You know, it's a whirlwind. I was in the state legislature for 8 years, but you pretty much have to relearn everything with regard to people and issues and protocols. And it's an amazing time to be in Washington because you name the issue and it's on the front burner down there, from healthcare to the war in Iraq to energy. And my learning curve is vertical at times, but I'm proud of what we've done. And maybe beyond any issue, I'm proud of the fact that we've taken back Washington. And we don't get everything right. It's a frustrating place to be right now with a Republican president and a Democratic Congress. But I think the most important thing is that all those lobbyists and special interests that, in the previous Congress were writing the laws, I mean, we're in the room drafting the legislation, they're back out where they belong, outside of the halls of Congress, and the people are back in charge. Now, we get some things wrong, we get some things right, but at least it's all of us who have control of our government again. What's
been your biggest accomplishment?
Well, I think for me, after 1 year there, maybe the most important thing is what we've done for education. I really do feel, as one of the younger members of Congress, that I've got a special role to be a voice for students and families trying to afford college. And the fact that we passed the biggest investment in student aid funding since the GI Bill, cutting the interest rates of student loans in half, is probably the biggest accomplishment. I'd say number two, though, is the energy bill. The first increase in fuel efficiency standards for cars since the 1970s. It's going to save consumers about $1,000 a year on gas costs, be the equivalent in the next 15 years of taking about 28,000 cars off the road simply by requiring that all cars sold in this country have 35-mile-a-gallon standards. That's pretty important as well for the environment, for energy costs, but also for national security, to make sure that this country isn't reliant and dependent on foreign oil. So I think education and energy, two huge issues for families here in Connecticut. I'm proud of both those two things.
People seem to be moving out of the cities in Connecticut along with businesses, and more people are driving than ever before. How do you get more people to use public transportation? How do you get money from Washington to our state for public transportation?
Connecticut obviously is a net loser when it comes to the amount of money we send to Washington versus what we get back. That's always going to be the case. We're one of the richer states in the nation. But we really have received the short end of the stick to a degree that's not justifiable. And I think a lot of that was because for years, the folks that were in charge of Congress under the Republicans were Southern and Midwestern congressmen. And, now that we have a Democratic leadership with more people from the Northeast in positions of power, we're going to try to use that to our advantage. Now, we don't want to swing the pendulum all the way back, but for instance, for mass transit funding, there's a lot of great things that we could do here in Connecticut. We've got lines from New Haven to Hartford and up to Bradley that could really change the way that people use our rails and our roads. And I think we're going to use the fact that we now have Northeastern members of Congress in politically powerful positions in Washington to our advantage.
Let's talk about some of the issues that you're going to be facing in the campaign this year. The website Politico.com has called your district one of the hotbeds of the immigration debate for 2008 because of what's been going on in Danbury. Mark Bowden, who was reelected, even though he was criticized for some of his immigration reforms there and in his methods there. How do you plan on improving immigration as a congressman? What would you like to see done?
It's a huge issue, and unfortunately, it's become hyper-politicized in Washington. I think you've got to approach it basically on a three-pronged strategy. One, there is so much more we can do on our borders. I mean, you're never going to completely shut down the massive borders between the United States and Mexico and Canada, but there's much more we can do with better technology and more patrolmen there. Two, you've got to start enforcing the laws that are on the books. I mean, there's no reason why we have gone from 400 enforcement actions at the federal level on employers to now anywhere from 4 to 20 a year. You've got to start enforcing the laws on the books. And third, you got to be honest about what we're going to do with the people that are here right now. I mean, it is just unrealistic to think that you're going to deport 12 million people overnight. We're going to have some rules about who can stay and who will have to go and how that will happen. And anybody that suggests that we're going to basically send everybody back to where they came from is being pretty unrealistic about this. But here's the thing. Right now in Washington, Republicans don't want to touch this. They want this issue to become the wedge election issue for 2008, and so they have resorted to a position of outright obstruction. I think we got to get something done. Maybe we're not going to pass a comprehensive immigration bill, Dennis, but we can at least do it in piecemeal fashion. And I think that's what we have to do when we go back. The problem is Republicans see this only as a political issue, not as a policy issue that has to be solved. That's our problem right now.
Do you think illegal immigrants living in our state should be given Connecticut driver's licenses?
No. That's the wrong way to approach this. I understand that states and municipalities, are looking at the federal inaction here and are forced to start to think creatively. But I think that that's a dangerous road to go down. No doubt we need to have a better account of who's here so that if they commit crimes, if they get in trouble, we can find them. But driver's licenses, I think, are a bridge too far.
Your opponent says you've supported it in the past.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. The campaign begins, a lot earlier than anyone would expect, and I think the distortions begin a little bit earlier. There's going to be plenty of time for a campaign. There's going to be plenty of time to go back and forth on some of these issues. For now, I know what I support. I know what I'm trying to push in Washington, and I'm going to focus on that.
Do you support Mayor DeStefano's plan in New Haven to give ID cards to all immigrants? Illegal
again, I think whether it's ID cards or whether it's driver's licenses, I think it becomes problematic. I think when you start cloaking people who are here without documentation with the look of legal citizens, you make it a lot harder for people to enforce the laws. I think what's happened in New Haven and what Spitzer is proposing in New York is more evidence that Congress needs to get off the ball and do their job. I mean, if I'm disappointed about one thing as a new member, it's the fact that we haven't been able to move forward in immigration, and I'm going to go back down there at the end of January and start to talk about doing this if we need to in a piecemeal fashion.
Let's talk about your fellow delegation to your south. We have Chris Shays, the lone Republican in all of New England, and Jim Himes, the Democrat running against him. Do you think that Chris Shays is bad for Connecticut?
I work with Chris Shays on a lot of things. We're on the Financial Services Committee and the Government Oversight Committee together. I think the problem, becomes the leadership that Chris Shays works with there. I mean, they are still an incredibly reactionary right-wing leadership, the Republicans. They are 15 seats away from taking back control of the House of Representatives. And I think that that's the main issue there. I work with Chris on a lot of things. I think he does a lot of good things for his constituents. I think the problem really lies in the leadership that he empowers, and I think that that'll become the issue there.
President Bush is in his last year. How do you think he'll get out in history? What kind of president?
Well, I think his legacy is going to be incredibly clouded. Not just because of the missteps in international policy. Obviously, I think one of the biggest piece of his legacy will be the disaster that he has wrought in Iraq and the consequences that it will have for this country in the long term. But maybe for now, the overlooked legacy will be what he's done to this country domestically. It's going to take us a long time to uncover from the damage he's done to the civil liberties that we used to enjoy in this country, the cuts to hospitals and social services, to Head Start programs that we're going to have to work to rebound from. He has really hurt a lot of our safety net structures here in Connecticut and throughout this country, and I worry it's going to take us a long time to rebuild that infrastructure.
Your party last won the governor's race in this state in 1986. What kind of governor do you think Governor Rell has been?
I think Governor Rell has done a lot of good things. I worked with her very closely on the stem cell bill. I couldn't be more thrilled that Connecticut is leading the way on campaign finance reform. And frankly, I got to give her a lot of credit for stepping out of the Republican box and working to pass some things that we weren't able to do for a very long time with John Rowland. And I think that a lot of her legacy will be positive. I think a lot of us would like to see some more vision. I think a lot of us would like to see her take a look at the property tax structure that I think cripples cities that I represent, like New Britain and Waterbury and Danbury, and step up to the plate and try to look a little bit more holistically. And so I worry that although her legacy may have some real highlights to it, that if we don't do something about the property tax system in Connecticut, that may be the lasting negative part of her legacy.
When Joe Lieberman was elected to the Senate last year, in 2006, he said that he was going to work hard to get a Democrat back in the White House, yet he's endorsed Republican John McCain. How do you feel about that?
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. I find it hard to believe that another 4 years of a Republican administration, whether it's George Bush or John McCain, is the right thing for this country. I can't understand how a stay-the-course policy in Iraq with John McCain espouses is going to make this country any safer or make this country any stronger. So I'm disappointed. We all understood that when Senator Lieberman got reelected that he was going to be a different voice than he was previously. But I think a lot of us that think this country has to take a different direction were disappointed with his choice.
Should he leave the party, or has he already left, you think?
Well, I think it's hard to justify that Senator Lieberman is a member of the Democratic Party any longer.
Chris Murphy, we'll see you again this year as you head to re-election.
All right, thank you very much.